I remember going riding home the whole time thinking, oh, something's different here.
Mm.
She's sending me help. Something's different.
Hello, everyone, and don't forget to order my book, Hidden Struggle, Breaking Free and Staying Free. It's being sold right now on Amazon, so do not miss out. Hi, everyone, and today we have Natasha. Hi, Natasha. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be with everyone. My name is Natasha Pierre, better known as Nat. Some people call me Tasha, but most people call me Nat. And I am a mental health advocate, specifically trained as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I also have a background, so that's my master's degree, but I also have a background in adult health. But my niche in what I really work with is growth for people who have neurodiversity or neuro type of diversity diagnosis. I do with coaching with the families, mothers, parents, single mothers specifically also, but also parents, and supporting them through navigating their children with neurodiversity.
So, how did you begin to walk out your calling that the Lord had on your life?
It's one of those growing pains kind of things. You go through a lot of paths you shouldn't have been on just to get detoured back. So originally, I started off in my career as a nurse. So that's my first role as a nurse. And then later on, I went on and I saw passion in mental health. Even with my passion in mental health, I delved in other places. But I did a majority of my time as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I worked in all age groups, but definitely felt a passion for those with children who have disabilities. And that passion fell across my lap at 29. I had my first child, and it wasn't until he was about 18 months or 2 years old that I noticed something was different than what I seen from other people's children.
Mm.
And then my true calling came because, we always ask the questions, even though we shouldn't say, why God, right? Why is this happening? I didn't notice then until now, and working in the field and helping other parents navigate and support them through this, that was exactly why was the beginning of the groundwork of my purpose.
So, what ways has the Lord showed up in your life?
He showed up many ways. And I think one of the things of why I call it growing pains is because that's where God shows us. I
Yes.
believe in all of our lives, it's through those deep valleys, those growing pains, those areas where we question, why is this happening to me? I've lined up everything correctly. I've saved enough money, or I've been good to people. Why is these things happening? And that's when I woke up, through, of course, understanding, I was raised in the faith, and understanding that, we know all the biblical scriptures. We know about Job's story. We know about
Mhm.
many of the people in Bible times that have gone through things, and, and come out greater, right? And even then, when they were questioning the other people around them who weren't supportive, right, they were still able to come up and show, look, this is why. If I stand on my faith in God, that I will get through. And I think that's what strengthened me. The stories in the Bible, also the people that God would put in place for me. Because a lot of times there was challenges, because there was the naysayers, right? There was the people who didn't know. Especially since this is something that was called to my purpose,
Yeah.
I was recognizing more and more that there was a lot of resources that weren't available. There was a lot of support systems that weren't there. There were people I couldn't go talk to because they didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to help me. So when I did find the people, God was placing them in schools. He was placing them in people I would talk to in the stores,
Mm.
and people I would run into that had their own children with autism would be, and they would say, "This is how we progressed," or "This is where my child was." Researching on my own, but definitely rooting myself in faith that, God, I know you're going to get me through this. You've got me through so many other things. There's no way that you're going to leave me out and leave me alone on this. And you're not. And then my son's going to learn to talk. He's going to walk. And I promise you, that is when those biggest challenges come, is when once we put our determination in that faith, God does work. It's almost like that what they say, don't takes that seed. I would wake up every day like, God, it became almost a freeing thing. So I went through the pain of the guilt, because I go work through the guilt. Well, why is it me? Did I do something wrong? Why am I the only person in the family? Why am I the first person dealing with this? Nobody else has this going on. Everybody else's children is fine. So after noticing that that was not, going to get me anywhere, right? Especially when you say it to the wrong people who only want you to feel bad because of where they are in their life, you realize there's certain people you shouldn't say things like that to. And I just started using the faith. Every day I woke up with my affirmations. God, you're going to get me through this. I'm going to go to the school. I'm going to go to these meetings. I'm going to listen to what they said. You put them there for a reason. I'm not doubting the doctors. I'm not doubting the therapists. I'm going to work them with them all. Um, and it's rough. I think mostly the challenges for me have been working through a lot of cultural stuff because culturally I'm from the Caribbean. My family is I'm here from the U.S. but still Caribbean, and then my ex-husband at the time, who's my son's father, also Caribbean. So there was a lot of the cultural biases that was difficult to get by, and that even more made sure that the people who I knew who were in faith, all of my family, and I said, look, we're not going to operate on, old myths, generational curses, or discussion about who could have done what. Why is this happening? We're going to
Yeah.
put our faith in God. This is where we are going to get the understanding. And it just brought so much peace to me, that peace that surpasses understanding. Like there was times I was moving and I couldn't worry. I didn't even have it in me to worry, because I would get up and I'm like, God, you have this. I know he's frustrated and I don't know what my son is saying, but you're going to help me understand. You're going to give me the patience. You're going to give me the guidance. You're going to give it to me. And that faith stepped in, and miracles after one miracle would just keep happening. I would get lined up with the right person. He would make strides. He would make improvements. He would say more words. So I knew God was working it out, because it's not by my power. It's not by my might. He was lining it up.
Yes. Amen. Amen. So when you found out that your child had autism, what scriptures encouraged you to get through those tough times in the beginning?
I did a lot of music because it calmed my son in the car. So I played a lot of music. I played a lot of music in the house. And a lot of it was spiritual music, of course. A lot of the Christian gospel music, a lot of old school music that had the words. More would be the music behind it too, because it was soothing for him.
Mhm.
But I also stood by Jeremiah 29:11. That, look, I know the plans I have for you. It's never to harm you, but to prosper you. And I was like, God, there's nothing that's happening here that you didn't already know about. I don't have to feel guilty. I don't have to keep looking and judging myself. I don't have to feel embarrassed taking my son out to family affairs or other places. You didn't do this to hurt me. This didn't wasn't here to hurt me, wasn't here to hurt my family, definitely wasn't here to hurt my son. So I think navigating through that scripture and really ingraining it into my everyday is truly what helped me.
And then in that season, in that beginning season of your life, what was the Lord showing you personally with yourself?
Oh, those growing pains.
Mm.
A lot.
Mm.
I didn't have the patience I thought I had. Because people always call, especially people who are caregivers. I was a nurse, so I was always the person people called to help fix things, right? I was the resource for a lot of people in my family when they needed things, navigating through whatever their crises or issues were. And here I am finding myself in a spot where I don't know. So it humbled me. Um, I also had to seek help, so it humbled me. I had to seek my own therapy to get through my own emotions, and how I had to move myself out of the way and stop making this about me, because there was a greater purpose, and I believe that that was only providing a distraction, right? Because then I couldn't be ready. I couldn't be available for my children, myself, my husband at the time. I wasn't going to be available for anybody if I truly didn't get what the lessons were, how I was going to grow from this. And I think once I learned about all the things that I thought I was, baby, I found out half that stuff wasn't true. I needed to still build a lot of patience, because when you're dealing with a child with autism, whether they're verbal and nonverbal, there's that part about the communication. I was used to seeing other people's children. I had nieces and nephews prior to this, and I watched them. I'm used to them communicating. Now I'm going to somebody, going through this as a mom, first time mom of your own child, and they're not communicating. They're not telling you what they want. You have to. I had speech therapy, but we started learning little sign languages when he wanted something to drink, and then I had to learn, right? So now that's a new learning curve for me. He's learning it, but I'm learning through that part. Then I had to learn. how to help him increase his vocabulary. But the biggest thing was patience and forgiveness, because there was a lot of things that he did wrong that I would label as wrong, but he couldn't help it, right? So I had to be able to forgive him at the moment in order to move past. I can't keep labeling this as bad as much as let me show you the right way. Let me give you the positive tools. So it was a lot of the growing pains of learning. I couldn't raise my son the way I was raised, right? I couldn't raise him the way I thought I saw everybody else doing it because he was different. He was special, and had his own character, but it still wasn't the way I was used to. Loud noises triggered him. So, I'm in a household or raised when you do something wrong, you're yelled at, right? The tone goes up. Everybody talks loud. I couldn't do that. Um, Other challenges were because he wasn't speaking yet, we couldn't speak the native Haitian Creole language in the house along with English. They were telling us in order for him to speak, we had to make sure we spoke one language in order to accelerate his speaking. So navigating that with other family members when you're talking and you're trying to encourage them when you go to affairs and things, I'm sorry, we got to really speak English. They came around, um and because I need him to be able to speak, and this is what they're saying, and then you go through the people that say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, he's going to talk fine, he's just the only child, he's just used to being held, that's why he's not walking, he's used to you getting everything he wants, so that's why he's not talking, you know what I mean? So those challenges of remembering not to be harsh to people, but understanding their lack of knowledge is where you were too, not too long ago. Where I was not too long ago, I really said a lot of the same things. So I had to give forgiveness and grace and patience all across. And that part probably took the most awakening to me. Was like, wow, you really got to learn to forgive. You really got to learn to have some patience. You can't just rush through a store. You have to talk to your son before and be like, look, I know this is your favorite store, we're not going to buy any toys. It doesn't mean you're a bad boy, but this is what we need to do, right? It's none of this. I know he's going to accept everything, and sometimes we walk in and it's too much stimulus, so I have to leave, until he's at an age now where that none of that matters, but those learning curves and giving yourself time and patience and grace, which is actually something we need every day. We all need to provide that every day. But I think that this gave me the strength to grow through that pain and understand how important it wasn't just for my son, it was for where God was going to take me, for what he had me to do. I was going to need this patience. I was going to need this grace. I was going to need to teach others, not just by mouth, but they were going to have to see it in what I do. I was also going to have to model it for my other kids to deal with their brother and sister, their brother, you know what I mean? But I have only three sons, so to deal with their brother. So once they see me modeling it, once my ex-husband saw me modeling it, it was such a peaceful environment. To this day, all three of my children are peaceful. And I think it was only because by the grace they had their older brother. So there's a lot of things I never did because I was raised culturally that way. And I should just say in my household, because that's just not culture. But my kids aren't used to a lot of yelling. So when we get together culturally and we're talking loud, watch one of my kids will come like, why are y'all talking so loud? I said, oh, you're not used to it, but we don't talk like that at home. I usually move away when I'm on the phone or I talk softer, you know what I mean? But this is what it's usually like, right? So a lot of things all the pains and things that I worked through became a great blessing. It really did become a great blessing.
Do you think that your background in therapy helped you to prepare you for the season that you're in?
Nope. So that's the funny thing, right?
Mhm.
I tell people all the time, I don't lead with therapy. I I have been divorced since 2017. My husband has since remarried, but I am still single. And I tell you that that is probably my number one gift that this give me. I became totally I stripped myself when I say that humble part. I just became totally ignorant, meaning everything that I thought I read in a book, I didn't allow it to supersede. I was actually made myself do that because I knew that that was part of taking away the ego part. And I believe that's also what allowed me to become so humble to receive the help that I did. Absolutely 100% believe that's why God allowed these people to enter my life, like the therapist and all the people that helped, and even the understanding from family, because of me not leading that. I didn't lead with my therapy. I am just like everybody else who, who didn't know anything. Because even though I read it in the book, I didn't allow it to supersede. I allowed it to become so humble to receive the help that I did. Absolutely 100% believe that's why God allowed these people to enter my life, like the therapist and all the people that helped, and even the understanding from family, because of me not leading that. I didn't lead with my therapy. I am just like everybody else who doesn't know, who didn't know anything. Because even though I read it in the book, experiencing it for yourself is the same, is a different thing. It's just like loss and death. You can read it all day long. You can help support somebody all day long. They could lose their child, but when or a parent, but when you happens to you, it hits different. It's a totally different feeling. And so for me, I wanted to be on the receiving end. I didn't want to lead with knowledge. I totally, and I promise the research that I read, I tried my best to only look at stuff that could help me. But
Mhm.
and I say this because I want to encourage other people to understand that there could be a lot of reasons that block you from receiving God's gifts. Because nothing, and this is true, nothing. Jeremiah 29 says 11 says it. There's nothing that God has in our lives that is made to tear us down. It's all about whether or not you're willing to set aside your ego, put faith first, put God first, so that you can realize what the true purpose is. Because one of the biggest things I tell people is, I didn't allow my ego. I didn't allow it. I went in like a 3 year old ignorant person who didn't know. And half these people, it wasn't until after, like I would be in meetings with my son's IEP or education meetings, and I'd be like, wait a minute, you know what this diagnosis means, or you know what this word means? I said, yes. Well, we didn't know that. I said, oh, I didn't tell you. I said, because I've learned a very long time ago that sometimes when you allow yourself to allow your education and previous knowledge enter into a situation, it blocks you. You
Mhm.
start leading with ego. You start thinking you know more than the people who are out there. And it doesn't matter how much I knew. I know one thing is true. Those people knew more than me. And if nothing else, those resources that I did not know about, because these people were in the field, helped my son get to everything he needed. And it allowed my family to flourish. My sons were my other sons were never embarrassed
Mhm.
about having brother. In fact, both of them would have friends at any given time that had autism too. They'd be like, oh, they had birthday parties. They invited autistic children. They didn't mind because they were like, oh, we have a brother like that. And we're all okay.
Mhm.
So I think that encouraged the understanding a lot better of an acceptance of, guess what? We're all different. My brother may have a challenge, but we're all different. And I think I didn't allow it to do that. It's funny because you caught me at a time where I really am walking in it, right? A
Mhm.
lot of different things have happened recently in my life that have allowed me to get there. Um, and we when I say the word growing pains, I mean it. I went through my own health challenge, had to be in the hospital. I got some serious bouts of anxiety when my mom was sick. Had to go into therapy. Then when my mom passed, I was dealing with like panic attacks, something I never had happen, even when my son was sick. And I was like, "Whoa, God, this is odd." And then I remember saying, "God, I literally said to him, because sometimes I do believe this. We're allowed to make our desires very specific to God. Just like when I said, I knew you wouldn't have my son speak, and I knew you would have my son walk. I literally laid it out just the same way, God, you did it for my son. And you allowed him to walk when he needed on time, when he was supposed to. It wasn't on time. He was about 20, almost going on 2 years old. So you had him speak at 5 years old. You're going to have me healed of this anxiety, and
Mhm.
whatever it is, that purpose that I know you've had in me to help others navigate through this, I'm going to do it. So it has actually, my business launched last month, but this month is the month that actually and it starts. I have my birthday this month, but this time I'm going full fledged into, I do mental health, but I have a whole total support system for those with neurodivergent children. And that happened even more so because God keeps putting things in my face all the time, and now I'm looking like I don't have a caregiver role as my mom anymore. My sons are much older, so I don't have those. And it's like God saying, you see, now you can't tell me you can't walk in your purpose, right? Because I told you. Every time I tell you, you don't do it, but this is what you're supposed to be doing. Because I run into a lot of parents who are still struggling with the things I was struggling with.
I was hearing that you were saying you were seeking therapy. What percentage of parents seek therapy when their kids have autism?
So that research is not as high as how many don't report to their children, but I will tell you that it is on the lower end. I did read some research that about 20% of parents don't, but there's a higher percentage, almost 70% of parents who don't tell their children or don't believe in therapy themselves, who also have a co-occurring illness themselves. So these are same parents who may have bipolar disorder, depression, they have some high anxiety, or they have any other neurodivergent diagnosis themselves, or they may have some borderline autistic disorder that is also preventing them from acknowledging it, because they're afraid that the same fear they have, they're imparting onto their child. So the fear of being labeled, the fear of not being accepted, right? The guilt, they put that on themselves, and then they also in turn don't get the help that they need. I always encourage parents, especially in the crux of learning about a diagnosis, to seek their own therapy, because a lot of time it calls for a lot of undoing of the way that we were used to doing things, or the way that we've heard things being done, or even our own ways we were raised. You have a lot of learning to do. Some of it involves tweaking, some involves you got to leave it alone. You got to undo, you got to literally like walk away from some of the ways we were raised. It causes a lot of growing struggles for parents who are single, and trying to also co-parent, because now this child is in two different places sometimes. So I always encourage parents to, whoever, both should go to therapy, but whichever one I can get to, go to therapy, so that you can be that resource to the other person. Maybe just the way you're moving will have that person recognize, hey, they're different. They're doing something different, I don't see them complain the same way that they used to, or I don't see the same behaviors with them the way I see with me. And I see a significant improvement when parents do that.
Okay.
And then they become the role model for the other kids in the house.
Mhm.
Because when you're frustrated, the kids pick that up and they use that. So then they get frustrated at that one child who has problems, right? And so then if there's fights all day long, or that child feels ostracized or, limited in their own house, and that should not be.
How can a person fit in therapy and their faith in Jesus Christ in healing or in dealing with difficulties in their lives?
That's a good question, because I think always that's a struggle in our Christian community. It's a strong concern in our Christian community. It's being embraced a lot more now than ever, but it's still a struggle. I hear a lot of different faiths, within or denominations, I should say, within the Christian faith, who look against that, and they only encourage prayer, and they only encourage reading your Bible and praying and fasting as the solution, right? And just reading your word and just claiming it, just declaring that's what you desire, and speaking against, denouncing the enemy or Satan and everything like that. But then that leads to say that this issue that is occurring is by the enemy and by the devil. That only places more blame and more guilt on me. So I don't want that route. I don't want people assuming that, something happening with their child having a diagnosis is because, of some, ill effect of the demon, or in some cultures, um, black magic or voodoo or some kind of thing that was happening. We don't want that, because number one, that does not allow God to work, right? We know that once we put our faith, once we put our alliance with one side, we're not allowing God to do what he needs to do. And we're not allowing God to be God, because we're now giving authority, right, to this thing, and saying, well, you're the reason why this is happening, instead of addressing it, that God, I don't need to know why. Remember, I was saying before, I know we shouldn't ask why. I don't need to know why. I just know, God, by your word, you say that my son, my daughter is going to be healed. They're going to talk, they're going to walk, they're going to be healed from their anxiety, depression. But in that, God, I also put faith that you're going to align all the right people. If that includes therapy, if that includes medication, I'm going to stand on your word. I'm going to continue praying, fasting, but I'm going to use the resources you line up. And that's what I tell Christians. I tell Christians, do you not think that God did not have the authority? I said, remember in the days of the Bible, every king, every high priest had somebody next to him that was a wise counsel, right? We would consider that maybe therapy now, right? That would not be just a friend, because they actually had these people beside them. Some of those people were ones that also prophesied, but they were also led to build these people up, right? They were their support. They confided in this person, because this person was supposed to make sure that they were that line to walk according to what God's will is. And I'm not saying that a therapist is a prophet, but what I am saying is God does place people who can support you, who can give you the right resources, the right things that you need to get to across this whatever the issue may be, whatever mental health issue. And I always say, people, we're quick to go to the doctors for medical reasons. We'll take that antibiotic. We can take that medication for the blood pressure. But why is it that we can't understand that mental health is just as important as our physical health? Why is it that we want to say that therapy is not important? That's part of the medication regimen. Therapy is part. Sometimes there's people who do therapy and don't need medication. Some people need both because there's research that says medications are only about one third or 33% effective. The rest of it is done through therapy and changing your life. There are people who come off of medications because of all the gains that they get from doing therapy. So I tell people that there is no reason that you can't even feel that there isn't a purpose in a therapist. Therapy is not an enemy of the Christian world. It is actually a very useful tool. God approves. God did not design therapists just now. They've been in works. Therapists have been here.
Is there any misconception, or what are some misconceptions when it comes to autism?
There's a lot. There's a lot of misconceptions with autism. I've heard the most highest one is that they're aggressive and they're mean and they hit people and they bite, they kick, they scream, almost like I hate to say it, like little gremlins. People think that they're mean. They're very um, can be very, very physical all the time. I've heard that many times. I've heard misconceptions that one of the big ones is, if you don't believe that it's by some hex or some black magic or voodoo, then the next big myth is that all autism is tied to immunizations, which is not all true. There have been studies that researched ties to it, but not all of these cases are. There are some people that say that it's from trauma of the mom or dad while the child is in birth. Now, there are cases that can be true, but it's not all that. If you walk to some child, there's not every woman, not every woman or mother has been exposed to some trauma. They haven't been abused. The father didn't just, talk ill to the womb, to the baby when it was in the room. Those are big misconceptions also. Some other misconceptions are what the child eats, especially, if they're not on the right diet. And I'm saying that prior to it happening. Some people say that that's what led to it. A lot of other things could be not giving the child the right environment. So now they're born and they're being neglected or they're being abused. Now that could be the tie, but that's a big myth that happens to every child. That's not the case. Um, there's other things that could be with. I've heard people say that the mom didn't eat enough when she was pregnant. She didn't take care of herself when she was pregnant. She didn't eat the right, from all those things. She
Yeah.
didn't listen to the right music. She should have moved from that state with a stressful job. Now, where there are indicators that stress can cause autism, it also can cause depression. It can also cause many other things. You know what I mean? Low birth weight. So there's a lot of myths but I think the biggest one is that they are very aggressive people and they're mean. I think that's one of the big ones. That they scream and they holler and they scream and they holler. And that's not every autistic disorder. A lot of times that is a different disorder that causes that. There's a trisomy, there's also developmental disabilities, and there's also tics that you can have and other anxiety related things that cause the screaming and yelling. It's not every child with autism. When you see them screaming and yelling, that's what it is. Or you assume that's what's going to happen.
What is the percentage of people who have autism or dealing with autism?
Oh, okay. Well, the research shows there's about 30, 20, about 15 to 20% of the population has it. About 7 out of 100 children born have some sort of level of it. So anywhere between 1 to 7. So it's about a good 17% of those diagnosed have some level of it out of 1,000, excuse me, not 100, out of 1,000. 7 out of 1,000 births will have a diagnosis of autism. So it's pretty high because if you think about how many births there are a year, it's pretty relatively high. It is one of the diagnoses that is not only accepted in the DSM, but it is approved for treatment. So people who have insurance and can get the resources that they need for their child. It is a diagnosis that will get you resources. Meaning, it's not like you have to have autism and and anxiety. You don't have to have autism and ADHD. it alone by itself will get you treatment. It'll get you a mental health treatment. It will get you therapy. It will also cover medications related to that diagnosis also. Children usually are diagnosed through their pediatrician. So that's how my son had it because he wasn't at the age to start school. And I remember it was about 18 months. And my pediatrician was just asking me the random questions they have to ask. And I remember she was running down the sheet and she says, "Is he eating a variety of foods?" And then she went down the list and she said, "Is he saying these words?" And I'm like, "No." And she says, "Is he calling your name mom?" And I'm like, "Actually, no, he's just pointing. He doesn't say mom yet." And she looked at me. She gave me that look. And I was like, "Oh, I don't like that look." She was like, "I'm going to write you a slip for something called early intervention," which is where therapy was coming into our house. We had speech therapy and um, um, occupational physical therapy to help him walk. And she was like, "Yeah, because he's supposed to be saying more than that." And I was like, I remember going riding home the whole time thinking, "Oh, something's different here.
Mm,
She's sending me help. Something's different." And I didn't have any diagnosis yet, didn't have anything. And I remember saying when I had to call the people in and they had to have their evaluation, that's when they let me know that my son, after they did the therapy in the home, I remember the misconceptions. One of the things my ex-husband would say all the time is, all they do is play with them when they come in. And I said, see, once again, that's the tool that they use because he's young. They would use different things to get him talking so that he would hold a doll or a game because he liked those and somebody else would, and they would talk and have a conversation so that he could mock that conversation. Something we never knew to do,
mhm,
and they played at his level and they knew how to make him say certain words by tapping or making him lift his tongue and his chin. There was all kinds of things they did. And I remember saying to myself, wow, if it wasn't for the pediatrician recognizing that and actually using it instead of just writing it off as, oh, this is the first child, she was the one. Now a lot of times those children bypass doctors, pediatricians don't pick it up, right? And I don't say that to blame the pediatrician. Some of them will lack the knowledge, to be honest. And they're so inundated with other sick children. They're probably like, okay, as long as this child's breathing, they're still gaining weight. The parents aren't concerned. We don't need to be concerned. And maybe the parents aren't reporting certain things either out of shame or because they don't know what to report.
mm,
But a lot of them will get recognized then when they start school
mhm,
because remember, along with my son not talking, he also wasn't potty trained. He wasn't walking and he wasn't potty trained. He wasn't even encouraged. Wasn't even didn't want anything to do with the bathroom at all. So, and he was very picky about the foods he ate, which is all along the lines. And I remember saying to myself, well, I thought those were all normal. I thought, not talking at this age because he was the first was normal.
mhm,
And the doctor saying, no, you need to follow this evaluation. And I called and these people came in, and from that time on, I'm telling you, they took care of everything. My son started school immediately at 3. They said with early intervention, this automatically places your son in school. I said, but he's not using the bathroom yet. It doesn't matter. We will find a school that he will even have to be, if he has to be changed diaper, he has to, because early intervention is called what it is, early.
mm,
So the earlier we can get him into an environment where he can learn, where he can thrive amongst other children, because research shows if you put them along other children their age doing better instead of adults that are just doing whatever he wants, right? We know it's 2 o'clock, we're going to feed him. Now he has to go to class where he's watching other kids. My
mhm,
son started school 3 years old, and in 2 weeks he was using the bathroom.
mm,
2 weeks. I was trying all day long. The teacher told me the second week, she's like, "Don't bring pull-ups anymore. He's getting in line with the other kids and using the bathroom." I said, I don't know if he knows what's going on, but he lined up and went to the bathroom. He was dry all day. And
mhm,
it's funny because that's the only child that never had a bedwetting issue either. My other children would have leaking issues for a couple times. From the time my son used the bathroom in school, he never wet the bed.
mm. Oh,
Never. And I was like, that was a 360 turn right there. That was 180. I mean, that was completely different. But
mm,
once again, lining with faith. God lined up all those people and everything that I thought I could do myself, all taken care of.
mm. Is there different levels of autism?
Yes. Ooh, did I lose you?
Oh, no, I'm still here.
Okay. There is.
Mhm,
There's actually 3 different levels of autism. There's level 1, 2, and 3. It goes from the least severe to the most severe. So the first part usually is more social deficits, some speech will happen. They will most likely walk. They'll have some deficits with walking and talking on time, but they're more at the mild. We know that some of those can talk right off the bat and just have the social deficits, meaning they're socially are triggered by loud noises, environments when there's too much stressors they can't handle. They don't take jokes well. They may not like the same comedy. People misunderstand too because not all of them are on the same level. Then there's level two when they have a little bit more issues, and a lot of it will be deficits with talking and walking and self care. So though they need assistance with that. Level three will be the nonverbal. They need total care. Um, the options for some of those is they're not going to be walking and talking. So there's different levels. But most of them is usually by social interacting, communication deficits, physical deficits that make either one of those levels happen.
With a person identified with autism, can they function in the real world when they are older?
And with the right resources, they can.
Okay.
A lot of the children will need different resources or supports, but some of them are actually able to live independently. Some of them will be able to be connected with independent housing structures where there's somebody that stops by and just checks on them, right? Make sure that their rent is paid. And some of them in their older age may end up in group homes. That is outside of the home. So that is one of the things that they can do to help support them live independently, but still with some kind of supervision.
Okay. So that's good that they do a lot for them to be able to be independent and be able to achieve those certain things in their life.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So how long has there been awareness with autism?
Well, that has really been changing because before 2010 in our DSM, we actually had Asperger's syndrome along with autism. They, at that time, removed Asperger's and only allowed autism. So that was through the works of happening over time. So my son was born in 2001, and I had heard about autism from the very, 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 very late 90s. But I know, excuse me, he was born in 2005. And I remember hearing it in 2001, hearing it as a big deal. When I went to school, autism was talked about as a diagnosis, but not like that. It was under the Asperger's. That's what the title was. It was all under Asperger's. And then they changed it in the 2010 DSM. It became addressed as autism one, two, or three. So they gave the three levels. So I would say to you that in 2001, I remember it being a really big, big, big deal. But by 2002s and threes, it was really getting a lot of resounding information. And it all started off with the one great, great, scientist who was also into research saying it was tied to the immunizations because he had a child that was doing fine, was meeting all the milestones, and then had received immunizations that led to the autism. And then other people started recognizing that. But there are also children who have the autism who never got immunizations at all, and they still have it.
Mhm.
But that is one of the ties to it. I'm not going to say that it's not impossible, but it is one of the ties.
What culture or race does it affect the most?
We find it amongst the males more than females for autism.
Mhm.
And across the board, they usually will say that their Asian population less than the American population. We do have a number that's crawling and matching a lot more before. It was more of the Caucasian population that you would see in research so that it felt like it was mostly them. But it definitely is more males than females. It also is definitely now more cohesively across the board an African American and a Caucasian diagnosis. I think the only reason that it's different for the African Americans getting caught up was access to care and being referred instead of thinking that it's not necessary, right? Or there's nothing wrong with them, or they don't need the help. That is just a child not wanting to talk, and that's their response. So I think that more access to care, and also the access to care has also availed itself to more options for the schools to be aware. So once that knowledge base, now the schools are very, very, very aware of autism. Whereas if you were back in 2001 asking for accommodations for your child, they wouldn't know what you meant.
Mm,
because your child's not developmentally disabled, so they don't fall into this category. They don't have anxiety and depression, so they don't fall in this category. So what do we do? So they were putting a lot of these children in like medical day places, and
mm,
those get capped out. There's only a certain amount of beds for those. And
mm,
then schools started having to make accommodations in classes, especially the public schools, where they would have children who are autistic, who are not responding or not verbal, that needed to be changed and cared for.
mhm.
Yeah.
So what is the early signs of someone having autism?
Okay, for early signs, when you are having a child who is not meeting the developmental milestones. So, someone who is having their child and they're supposed to be sitting up by 6 months, they're supposed to coo and ka. They're supposed to look you in the eyes sometimes when you look at them, and you just notice that they never want to look at you, that they don't like certain touch. You notice that they cry more often or they're too extra quiet too much. So the extremes, that's not the normal for their age development. And then they track that and they keep comparing. Okay, now 5 months, maybe they're just a little delayed. 6 months, maybe they're just delayed. And maybe now we're going to measure it up to 8 months. Now we're going to measure it up to 12. And even then they're giving them up to like 18 months to catch up. But usually most providers by 18 to 24 months should be able to tell you if there are major significant delays that have not made the improvement that they need to, meaning they're not saying any more words than they were supposed to say, right? Besides mama. So now they're supposed to say 20 words and they're still at five. Because
Mm,
before they were at one, but they're still behind because they're only at five. You know what I mean? They're not catching up. And now they're supposed to be at 80 words and they're at 5 or 10, and you can't even get them to say the other ones. So there are levels, and the assessment for that is done by a psychologist or psychiatrist or licensed nurse practitioner, and they will have a battery of assessments that have to be done to determine it. But those would be the ones that you would make you look like, I should I should bring this up to the doctor. I should bring this concern up to the doctor. A lot of times too, um, parents assume if one child has autism, the other ones do. Now there is a genetic link, and sometimes, just like we were talking about, there is a genetic link in autism. I have seen where siblings have autism and another child has autism, and a lot of times it could be because there is a genetic link on both sides that happens, both parents. Um, but autism does have a genetic link. So a lot of times, if you see one child have it, and you're comparing your other child, it doesn't mean that they have it too. But then that also gives you that gauge, like, okay, I remember that child being very sensitive to noises, and and starting to not want to be laid on certain times and scream and holler, or they were really extra quiet all the time and didn't make sounds. Because there's a lot of things that get evaluated. They're going to evaluate vision. They're going to evaluate hearing, just to make sure. They send the children to places, make sure there's no oral thing that's keeping their tongue from moving up, or there's any like actual deficits in their body. Because sometimes you can have children who don't hear, and that's the reason why they're not talking, right?
yeah.
So there's a lot of tests that get done to make sure before we label it as that.
Mhm. And how old is your son now?
My oldest son, he's 20.
20.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have any encouraging words or last words you would like to say to the audience?
I think that one of the big things is growing pains through challenges in life is something that we all experience. But when it comes to supporting people through this, it goes to show how important it is. All of us are on that support system. We understand that faith is important because we know that God is what is the only standing forefront that will get us through. We put him first in everything, but then we also realize that he allows certain things to not just happen, but he allows certain people with certain knowledge to assist us navigate through things. So we shouldn't be afraid to speak up if we see something that looks odd, or we're questioning whether or not our child is meeting certain things. We shouldn't be afraid to seek assistance through therapy as the parent, as the adult. We shouldn't be afraid to call it what it is. If a child has autism, call it what it is. We shouldn't have shame or doubt or fear about that because God is not of that. And we stand on what Jeremiah 29:11 says. God doesn't allow anything to harm us. Nothing's going to be to harm us. It's always to prosper us, to grow us. So even through that growing pains, we're learning patience. We're learning to set ego aside. We're learning to be humble. We're learning to speak softer. So those are the benefits that I extremely learned. I learned that, and I see it in my children. I see how I'll walk across people say, yeah, my kids do this. My children are so peaceful. And I think because I had to set that peaceful environment, it allowed them to be respectful, not just to adults, but to their other brother who has autism. So we see that modeled. So you become a strength, not just for people outside your home, but inside your home. You become a walking witness to what change can do. You know, what you thought was pain, what you thought was a heartache, what it can really bless you with. It will bless your life, and it will bless so many people that come across you.
So thank you so much, Natasha, for telling your story and bringing awareness.
Thank you.
Right.